one of the most natural disaster-prone countries in the world. These various disasters plague the whole country and occur with high frequency and cause heavy loss. While global climate change is increasing the frequency of these disasters, China's rapid economic development and urbanization are increasing the pressure on the nation's resources and natural environment. All this means that the demands on natural disaster prevention and relief work are becoming more pressing and more complex. Over the past 20 years in China, an average of nearly 400 million people annually have been affected by natural disasters. Each year, more than 4,000 people are killed or go missing. 10 million people have to be relocated, and 2.8 million houses collapse due to natural disasters. The losses are estimated at 230 billion yuan per year. Learning from these harrowing experiences, the Chinese government has steadily increased its focus on comprehensive disaster reduction and scientific prevention. Constantly improving disaster prevention, reduction and relief systems and enhancing the legal system, it has made great efforts to promote the construction of a comprehensive disaster prevention and reduction system. The government's efforts to build up the nation's capability in the field has brought about three elementary shifts, namely from single disaster reduction to comprehensive disaster reduction, from focusing on disaster relief to focusing on disaster reduction and relief, and from reducing disaster losses to reducing disaster risk. These shifts have helped not only to improve the nation's comprehensive disaster prevention and reduction capability, but also to minimize the loss of life and property caused by natural disasters. In 2005, the Second World Conference on Disaster Reduction was held. Since then, the Chinese government has vigorously promoted the United Nations-sponsored Hyogo Framework for Action. It has worked on mitigating disasters by evaluating the national conditions, perfecting the organizational system, and improving working mechanisms. These efforts can be seen in 5 main aspects. Over the years, the government has incorporated the reduction of natural disaster risk into national and local sustainable development strategies. In 2007, it introduced the 11th Five-Year Plan for Comprehensive Disaster Reduction, requiring local governments to include disaster reduction in their economic and social development plans. In 2011, the National Comprehensive Disaster Prevention and Reduction Plan for 2011 to 2015 was enacted. It defined the core concepts, main tasks and key projects of the government's comprehensive disaster prevention and reduction work. Under the 2011 to 2015 plan, the death toll from natural disasters is expected to fall, and the direct economic losses are targeted at no more than 1.5% of GDP. In achieving its objectives for disaster reduction, the government is focusing on both engineering and non-engineering measures. It is also encouraging both the authorities and the market to improve their disaster prevention and reduction capabilities and reduce the impact of disasters. The level of disaster resistance has been significantly enhanced by the government's efforts to build earthquake-proof buildings, renovate unsafe housing, and construct safe schools and hospitals. In terms of disaster losses, in the recent 3 years, the proportion of direct economic loss caused by natural disasters has fallen within the target of 1.5% of GDP. In implementing the HFA, the government has attached great importance to disaster prevention and reduction capabilities at the grassroots level, with efforts being spread across urban and rural areas. Since 2007, National Comprehensive Disaster Reduction Demonstration Community projects have been extended across the country, with 5,408 of these communities established nationwide by the end of 2013. Based on these demonstration communities, regional governments have been campaigning for urban and rural population centres to establish their own disaster reduction mechanisms and conduct local disaster risk assessments. In 94% of towns and 59% of administrative villages, contingency plans have been drawn up and regular awareness campaigns and drills are organised. Emergency shelters are now to be found in urban and rural areas across the country, and in 18 hub cities, centrally administered stockpiles of disaster relief goods have been established. At the community level, facilities and relief equipment have been upgraded. The government has carried out a comprehensive risk assessment of common natural disasters, including floods and earthquakes, and other severe geological and marine events. The results were published in a landmark Atlas of Natural Disaster Risk of China, which includes a special database for comprehensive risk assessment and disaster prevention, and establishes a national natural disaster risk assessment model. This model is applicable at both the national and local level. Natural disaster early warning is supported by a three-dimensional monitoring and early warning system, incorporating ground monitoring and seabed and aerial observation. Since the 1990s, modern Earth observation, satellite communication and network technologies have been embraced to improve the monitoring and early warning systems. To this end, the Small Satellite Constellation for Disaster and Environment Monitoring and Forecasting has been launched, as well as several other satellites for meteorological, oceanographic, and resource investigation, which can also be used for natural disaster risk management.
反亚比中心经过的海面或地区的风力甚至可达12到16级。
In 2009, the government introduced the National Disaster Prevention and Reduction Day, when all regions and the relevant ministries are required to conduct a series of education and public awareness activities highlighting disaster prevention and reduction. In combination with the National Disaster Prevention and Reduction Day, other annual events, including the International Day for Disaster Reduction, World Meteorological Day, and National Firefighting Day, are occasions for the government to promote disaster awareness in the countryside and within communities, enterprises, and schools. Disaster awareness is now part of the school curriculum, and mechanisms have been set up for the media to raise public awareness of the issue, with the result that people are now better prepared to deal with natural disasters. To improve the capacity to prevent disasters, the government has vigorously promoted comprehensive disaster prevention and reduction projects. To this end, considerable progress has been made in strengthening the management of large rivers, improving dangerous reservoirs, and upgrading primary and middle school buildings to make them safer. Land ruined by natural disasters has been reclaimed, and based on improving engineering standards and regulations, unsafe housing has been renovated and made resistant to earthquakes. Some larger rivers are now capable of withstanding once-in-a-century flooding. More than 9 million earthquake-proof houses have been completed, benefiting 40 million people. The central government has allocated 30 billion yuan for the cause, while 375,000 primary and middle school buildings have been strengthened thanks to 350 billion yuan of local government funding. The government has created a Natural Disaster Loss Assessment Index. In the event of a disaster, it organises the relevant government departments and experts from the NCDR to carry out an assessment of the losses and draw up a reconstruction plan. The basic aim is to restore production in the disaster-stricken area to normal as soon as possible. In the wake of the devastating Wenchuan and Yushu earthquakes, the central government implemented an interprovincial aid strategy to support the restoration and reconstruction effort. Ultimately, basic production and living conditions and levels of economic and social development in the disaster-stricken areas were better than before the earthquake. The government has established a disaster emergency management system incorporating unified command and coordination mechanisms. Management is localised, based on graded levels of responsibility and on a disaster reduction and relief mechanism that is designed for maximum efficiency. Depending on the level of the threat, the NCDR has established 4 natural disaster relief emergency response grades, based on which appropriate levels of relief can be organised. Rescue and medical teams can be sent to the disaster area to ensure the immediate relief and evacuation of victims, and the necessary relief materials and rescue equipment can also be transported there, with the aim of minimising the loss of life and property. In addition, various social mobilisation mechanisms have been introduced, allowing civil organisations and approved autonomous grassroots organisations and volunteers to aid in disaster relief efforts. The government attaches great importance to the supporting role of science and technology in disaster prevention and reduction. It encourages research and development on key technologies for disaster reduction and formulates medium and long-term science and technology development strategies for national comprehensive disaster reduction. It is working to speed up the adoption of remote sensing and geographic information systems, global positioning systems, and network communications technology, and is increasing investment in comprehensive disaster reduction technologies. It has set up a scheme for training disaster reduction personnel and established a comprehensive disaster reduction technology standardization system. In the wake of the earthquakes in Wenchuan and Yushu and the landslides in Zhouqu, the State Council employed the Ministry of Civil Affairs, the relevant government departments, and the disaster-hit regions themselves. The expert committee of the NCDR and the National Disaster Reduction Centre undertook comprehensive disaster loss assessments, providing a scientific basis for the preparation of post-earthquake recovery and reconstruction planning. Against the backdrop of global climate change, the risk of natural disasters in China caused by drought, flooding, typhoons, low temperatures, snow and ice, heat waves, sandstorms, plant disease and pestilence will only increase. Disasters such as subsidence, landslides and mudslides and mountain floods carry with them ever higher risks. The distribution and extent of the losses and the breadth and depth of the impact of natural disasters will create new challenges. Disasters will become more sudden, more extreme, and more difficult to predict. With continuing industrialization and urbanization, populations will become more concentrated in urban areas, and the carrying capacity of infrastructure will keep increasing. As a result, the impact of natural disasters on cities will be more severe. In the countryside, especially the central and western regions and places where economic and social development is relatively backward, low prevention levels mean people are less able to withstand disasters, and the risk of secondary and derivative disasters caused by natural disasters will remain high. As the next step in solving the major problems and various challenges facing disaster prevention and reduction, the government will focus on improving the systems and mechanisms for disaster prevention and reduction and the provision of relief in times of need. It will continue to enhance the national comprehensive disaster prevention and reduction capability and will work together with the international community to strengthen practical cooperation in disaster prevention and reduction. It will include disaster reduction work in its international development agenda and actively participate in the consultations on and implementation of the UN's post-2015 Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction, otherwise known as HFA2. By sharing its experiences and achievements, China will make new contributions to global cooperation in disaster prevention and reduction.